Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome back, everybody, to Hooked on Movies podcast. Today we will be covering the 2002 Spike Lee joint, 25th Hour. With me, as always, are Ken.
I have been in 3 different prisons, Montgomery. 3 different countries. And you know what I've learned? I've learned prison is a bad place to be.
And Ted.
You know, Justin, you know what a man should never ask in a Victoria's Secret shop? Does this come in children's sizes?
And I'm your host, Justin. Champagne for my real friends and real pain for my sham friends. Eric is still on assignment, still looking for his pants. And we are talking about this movie, 25th Hour, from Spike Lee. Back again, fellas, to talk about Spike Lee. How we doing?
Doing all right.
Doing good.
Mr. Ted, why don't you give us some details on this one, please?
Okay, 25th Hour is directed by Spike Lee. It was a screenplay by David Benoff, based off of the novel The 25th Hour by David Benoff, with a running time of 135 minutes. It had a release date of December 19th, 2002. It had a budget of $5 million and a box office gross of $23.9 million. Now, I didn't realize this until this watching, that David Benoff was the screenwriter for this. He's part of the team that adapted Game of Thrones for HBO.
That's what I thought when you
Benoff
said
and
the name,
Weiss.
yeah.
So 25th Hour stars Edward Norton as Monty Brogan, Philip Seymour Hoffman as Jacob Belinsky, Barry Pepper as Frank Slattery, Rosario Dawson as Natural Rivera, Anna Paquin as Mary D'Annunzio, Brian Cox as James Brogan, and Tony Saragusa as Kostya Novotny.
What do the critics think about this film?
The critics were overwhelmingly pretty satisfied with this movie. It comes in with a certified fresh to Rotten Tomatoes score of 79%. It has an audience score of a positive 85%. We'll start with the negative critics. There were a few that I found. One of them being Mike Clark from USA Today. He said, the latest movie to prove that for all his talent and ability to attract excellent actors, director Spike Lee has to quit overstuffing his narratives. And then Terry Lawson from the Detroit Free Press said, if there was ever a filmmaker in need of someone who could tell him where and when to stop, what to leave in and what to take out, it would be Spike Lee. But then on the positive side, all of our heavy hitters were on the positive side for this movie. Richard Roper from Ebert and Roper said, as strong as the supporting cast is, Edward Norton really carries this film to a special status with his riveting performance. And of course, Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times. He said, everybody knows that Spike Lee is an important filmmaker, but do they realize how good he is with actors and how innovative he is with style? We live in a period where many filmmakers use either a straightforward meat and potatoes style or a draw attention with meaningless over-editing, queasy cams, and showboat shots. With Lee, as with any classical director, the emphasis is on the story and the people.
Well, speaking of story, Ken, do you have the plot for this one?
Yes. A car pulls up on a New York City street, which Monty Brogan exits with his friend Kostya to look at an injured dog laying in the road. Monty intends to perform a mercy kill and shoot him, but changes his mind when he looks in his eye. He takes the dog to a nearby clinic instead. A few years later, Monty is about to begin serving a 7-year prison sentence for dealing drugs. He sits in the park where Doyle, the dog he rescued, on the last day of his freedom. He plans to meet his childhood friends Frank, a boorish Wall Street trader, and Jacob, a high school teacher with a crush on a student, Mary, and at a club with his girlfriend, Naturel. Monty visits his father, James, a former firefighter and recovering alcoholic, at his bar to confirm their plans to drive to the prison the following morning. James was able to establish the bar with Monty's drug money and remorsefully sneaks a drink when Monty goes to the bathroom. Facing himself in the mirror, Monty lashes out in his mind against everyone in New York before finally turning on himself, angry for becoming greedy and not giving up drug dealing before he was caught. In a flashback, Monty remembers the night he was arrested. DEA agents raided Monty's apartment and quickly found the drugs he was selling for a Russian mobster. Costa tries to persuade Monty it was Natural who betrayed him, since she knew where his drugs and money were hidden. Monty refuses to turn state's evidence against the Russian mobster, but is unsure about his actions. Monty remembers how he met Natural hanging around his old school and how happy they were. He then asks Frank to find out if it was Natural who betrayed him. Jacob sees Mary outside the club, and Monty invites her inside with them, discussing what kind of future Monty can have after prison. Monty says that they can open a bar together, even though he told Jacob that he believes Monty deserves his sentence for dealing drugs. Frank accuses Natural of living high on Monty's money, despite knowing its origins, but she retorts that Frank also knew, but said nothing. Jacob, meanwhile, finds the courage to kiss Mary, but both are shocked afterwards and go their separate ways. Nikolai then reveals it was Costa who betrayed Monty, and offers him a chance to kill him in exchange for protecting his father's bar. Monty refuses, reminding Nikolai that he was the one who told Monty to trust Koska in the first place. Monty walks off, leaving Koska to be killed by the Russian mobsters. Monty returns to his apartment and apologizes to Natural for mistrusting her. He admits that he is terrified of being raped in prison, whereupon he asks Frank to beat him, believing that he might have a chance at survival if he enters the prison ugly. Frank refuses, and Monty goads Frank into taking out his frustrations, leaving Monty bruised and bloodied. Natural tries to comfort him as Monty's father arrives to take him to prison. On the drive to prison, Monty once again sees a parade of faces from the streets of the city. As they drive up the turnpike, James suggests that they take the George Washington Bridge to go west into hiding, and gives Monty a vision of a future where he avoids imprisonment and reunites with Natural, starts a family, and grows old. When the vision stops, they are past the bridge, still driving towards the prison. The end.
Fellas, let's talk about when was the first time that you saw this movie. It's from 2002, post 9/11. You can see the city that has like the two pillars of light that went up. When would have been the first time you saw this?
This is the first time I've ever seen this. I didn't even know that this movie existed until Ted had picked this movie as one of his Spike Lee movies. And I was interested to see it because Edward Norton Jr. is a fantastic actor. So based on that alone, I was game to watch it for this podcast. So yeah, this is the first time.
Yeah, I saw this in the movie theater with my wife. I'm a huge Ed Norton fan, and I'm a huge Spike Lee fan. So this was a no-brainer, because it was also billed as, this is supposed to be like Spike Lee's Honor to New York, September 11th movie type of a thing. There's references to it throughout the movie. And of course, not only does it have Ed Norton, it also has Brian Cox, who I absolutely love. And it's got Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I absolutely adore as well. This was a no-brainer, see it in the movie theater for us.
Yeah, and I think this was probably right at or around when Brian Cox was in X2. Let's see, Norton was coming down off of Fight Club at this point, so he had like 5 movies released in 2002. I saw this around then. I would have rented this at Blockbuster, and then 2 years later, or 1 year later, I'd be working at Blockbuster. So
Ted was talking about, this is a Spike Lee movie about New York, right? When I watched this movie, I got kind of vibes of Taxi Driver in a sense. It wasn't the pretty New York that we see, though there's images of things here and there, but because it's after 9/11 and because of where the buildings were, and it feels a little bit more grungy looking and it feels a little bit more grainy looking, which makes me think about Taxi Driver.
Jeez, I thought it was clean. Like when you look at that first shot of the movie where you're sitting on the bench, there's no garbage. Right? It's like, it's clean. You look at when Natural is sitting out on the stoop. I didn't see any garbage there either. Just one of those things where it's like, okay, I expected it to be a little bit grittier, but I got kind of like the opposite feeling. I'm like, wow, this is actually like picked up and sanitized.
It is in a way, but I get what Ken's saying. It's showing a different side of New York too. I think there's a realism here that feels honest. There's an honesty that Spike brings to this particular movie. as kind of an homage to New York. And it's ironic, Ken, that you'd bring up Taxi Driver, because when we did Do the Right Thing, that Martin Scorsese is a huge influence on Spike Lee. They have a lot of similar styles too. I know that Roger Ebert had kind of brought up some of the different styles that Spike uses. The one that's in particular is that caught me in this movie, as far as if there was an homage to Martin Scorsese. After Philip Seymour Hoffman's character kisses Mary, and he comes out of the bathroom, and it's a scan shot. And it's shot from up above. It had that air of homage to Scorsese, but the colors are more grungy, kind of like a Taxi Driver.
Filtered, I think.
That's one of the things about this movie that I really enjoyed. It brings an honesty.
The cinematography here is what really makes this movie interesting, like you just said with that shot. But I mean, I see all different kind of camera tricks that are done throughout the movie. We see the one where one of his friends that works in the stock stuff, he's arguing with his boss, and they have like a reflection shot. For me, that feels very Scorsese type of ish. So these camera tricks. I think the guy that was his cameraman was somebody that he didn't work with before. He usually likes to work with the same people, doing the same, and writing his own stuff. And this movie's totally different. This is not written by Spike Lee. Some of the people that are working with him are different people than he's worked with before. So this is kind of like a stretch for Spike Lee, because he's usually got his own people around him, and this is a little bit different.
I just want to lead with something here. I think that Barry Pepper is a criminally underrated actor. Just in terms of what he's done. I know everybody gives him shit because they're like, oh, yeah, Battlefield Earth and all that. You know what? He is phenomenal, and I've never seen him in a bad performance.
My favorite movie from him is 61, where he played Roger Maris.
Yeah, exactly.
He's very good there.
To a point where it's like, this character's not likable, but you like him? I'm like, that's a very nuanced performance, Ken, actually.
You feel for him.
Yeah,
because he's torn, and he plays a torn person that's torn really well here. It's against his sensibilities and what he feels that his best friend has found himself in this situation, and he still loves his best friend, but he hates what he's done. And it's a really nuanced performance. Yeah, I agree 100%. He was really good in 61, Ken. That's a HBO movie that is pretty underrated. Thomas Jane's really good in that, too.
Oh, yeah, it's Mickey Mantle. Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I didn't care for this performance until he beats the crap out of Edward Norton at the end. Because it brings that performance all together. Without him beating him up at the end and showing all that emotion, he just comes off of being as a prick throughout the whole movie. But then we really see what he's going through, the anguish that he's going through when he lets it all out and beats the crap out of him.
I like that scene under the bridge there. That's really good. The one that caught me was where he feels that he's got to push Naturel to the limit. And to do it, he's got to continually drink. And he's drinking himself basically into a stupor to try to be able to do this because he doesn't want to do it. But he feels the loyalty towards his best friend. And that's a rough scene to watch because you really feel for her. But you feel for him, too, because you realize that for him to do this, he's betraying a lot of himself. But my favorite, as far as we talked about favorite performances for Barry Pepper, I still go back to he's the sniper in
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan. You're right. He does get a lot of shit for being in Battlefield Earth.
Which he should.
It's a movie that should never have been made, where John Travolta tried to dress up like Rob Zombie.
Horrible movie. It's like in my top 5 of worst movies of all time.
Yeah, we all know why it was made. Yeah. It was made because it's a Scientology book. It's horrible. He's a really good actor.
Seen that one. That was such a simple movie where he gets stuck underneath a house with alligators in a flood. And I'm like, wow. This is actually a pretty compelling film. Like, I get it. It's scary. It's CGI is better than most, but it's not a great movie, but it was a great performance. I like that about this guy because, like you're saying, you don't like him throughout the whole movie because you feel like he's the hothead, he's the cowboy. He's not doing, right by everybody, but he's loyal to his core. That's the thing. He's going to be there no matter what. You're my best friend. I'm going to be there, and that's who he is.
Why else would he still be friends with Jacob? They have literally nothing in common at this point in their lives. So you know that there's a loyalty there that he has.
Yeah, there's one to dissect too, and I know you said that you were excited because Philip Seymour Hoffman and all that. I feel, I'm going to take the Ken perspective here. I feel that was the performance that you could literally cut and paste another actor into, and you would have gotten just as much out of it in this film.
I kind of agree with you on that
All
because
right.
of the fact, because I felt like I've seen this performance before from Philip Seymour Hoffman. I feel
Way
like
too
this
subdued.
is his baseline. He's basically playing himself.
I was thinking
it reminds
of Along
me.
Came Polly, right?
It reminds me of that. It reminds me of Patch Adams when he was in the movie Patch Adams. I was just thinking about this, throughout the whole movie, that really there's no range. Also, State of Maine. He's talking in the same type of being. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of range here, which it doesn't really need to have that much range. And that's a great thing about Philip Seymour Hoffman, though, is he is an everyday man. He looks like the everyday man. He doesn't look like your typical Hollywood actor. He's not the best looking guy, but you could almost relate with him because of the fact that kind of looks like the average Joe. I love the conversation that Frank and Jacob have about the rating system. How Jacob is like a 99 or something like that on his rating system. And that's a little bit fun. It's stupid, but it's fun. But I think without the little student issue going on, I don't know if the character is that interesting, though.
That's the thing. He's not. He's boring. And, all he does is ask about Doyle. That's all he does to move whatever plot forward. And then at the end, he's like, oh, can you take care of Doyle? And I'm like, what did this character serve? Like, he was a distraction to show how cool Monty was because Monty let the student in?
And then the situation with the student, it's awkward because we don't have enough of it. It's a subplot that basically, there's no payoff, really. He kisses her in the bathroom towards the end of the movie. We don't get anything else out of that. We don't know if anything else happened. Does she run and tell? Does he raise her grade? What actually happens to him, we don't know. It kind of leaves us going, all right, so that happened, I guess.
He reminds me of a poor man's version of Donnie from Big Lebowski. Just kind of walking around, like, saying stuff in the background. It's like, I am the walrus. And they're like, shut the fuck up, Donnie. I just don't see him really contributing much to the character's journey. Like, whereas, like, you even have Frank, who is moving stuff along. Naturel, who's moving stuff along. Costas, or whatever, is moving stuff along. And Jacob's just like, hey, everyone, I'm here. I'm like, okay, maybe we could have done a little more with this on some level.
Maybe a little bit more backstory, maybe a little bit more. They do how many years back? 5, 6 years? Why not show the relationship of what it was 5 or 6 years ago and stuff like that, and show the relationships now? Maybe that would make it more interesting to see where they were and where they are now.
Or give him something more to do, except for just sitting there in that stupid Yankees hat, just like holding up the edge of the bar while all the other characters go off to have interesting conversations.
Well, it's like the bartender. Why not have like some witty conversation with the bartender, going back and forth? You present the bartender, you give a little bit of a possibility that the bartender might like him. Why not give him a little bit more? Why not do a little bit more with that?
Validate that whole scene where he's talking about how he's a catch over Barry Pepper because Barry Pepper like dyes his hair. So maybe like she says something like, "Oh, sorry, I don't date guys who dye their hair." It could be anything. Like just add something in there.
I go for guys with glasses. Something like that.
Or maybe he quotes the poem that Anna Paquin's character was doing or something like that, and she's into literature. But it's just my point. It's like vapid. It's kind of like a hollow appearance, and I'm like, all right, you got the star power here, but I just don't see what he contributed to this sort of mix.
What is it with the bartender saying it's her birthday and they don't give a shit? I mean, I understand it's because her friend's last day. Okay, I get that. Yeah. But here you have Jacob. Jacob should be excited about that. Give us something. Jacob just seems so blah. And so when we get to the point where he's about ready to kiss his student, we don't get a sense that this was a struggle to begin with.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like he really, there was a real challenge there. Even when she's sitting there talking about the grade, he really doesn't seem to be sexually interested in her. At least I'm not getting that. He kind of just talking to her in that, like I said, blah tone, maybe have some type of facial expressions or, some type of witty dialogue, that he's flirting with her or something to that extent, but nothing. So when he kisses her, it comes out of nowhere.
It was totally random. Is Monty supposedly inspiring him to come out of his shell or something like that? And it's like, this is the appropriate way that he does it. It doesn't feel like the juice was worth the squeeze.
Yep.
I've listened to everything that you guys have said, and there are parts that I do agree with. I think, though, that...
and you should.
I think that, though, that if we're looking at this as a lesser role for him, we're still looking at one of the great actors of this generation. And I think that there is a lot of subtlety, because I did get the fact that he has struggled. He's struggled with this infatuation that he has with, for lack of a better term, a Lolita type of character who is purposefully trying to essentially tempt him. He's doing everything in his power to be restrained from just going and having an inappropriate relationship that he knows would sacrifice his entire life. And he's not like Barry Pepper, and he's not like Monty. He's not the person that takes chances. When he does go and kiss the student, he's taking a risk. Each one of these characters takes a risk and gets burned in a certain... The only one who doesn't is Barry Pepper's character, and his chance paid off with the unemployment numbers. But Monty's risk came back negative, and we can connect the dots about what could happen to Jacob after he's kissed
that's a good take.
his student. And so he's taken this risk that he's never really taken in life. And Barry Pepper kind of tells him that he's never really taken a risk at all. And he's still the same person. Where I think that there's a lot of subtlety in Philip Seymour Hoffman's portrayal here. He's doing everything to restrain himself. He wants this relationship. And while, I agree with both of you, the bartender should have been somebody that he would have taken a chance and went after. But he's so messed up over his feelings for this underage girl that it's like he can't even put that together. And you can see he's searching. I understand this character. In my opinion, it's played like a real-life human being. And I think that's something that not a lot of actors can pull off. This is a person you can actually say that he's having real emotions.
I don't agree with you on that. It looks like it's the same emotion through the whole movie. I actually thought that Monty was going to bang her before he would even try to do it, because Monty is the one that kind of brings up the fact that she's a hottie when he comes to visit her. He's the one that invites her into the club. Jacob is not doing any of these things. In fact, when she does straddle him, he wakes up and says, no. It would have made more sense if he started making out with her right there when she's straddling him than saying no and then waiting like 3 minutes to go upstairs to the bathroom.
But he's so worried about people seeing him do it. That's where it becomes real, because he's still so concerned about somebody seeing them and catching him doing this that he waits until she's alone. And I think the fact that he waits until she's alone, I think, is what ultimately creeps her out, too.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and I think that's what they were aiming for. I just think that he doesn't have a wide array of emotions for me to get into it. Because of, like I said, his character is so blah and bland.
Yeah, he spends a lot of time sitting quietly, yeah.
Yeah, that I'm not seeing a difference between him and his infatuation and just him in general. It all just seems like it's all the same. So when this happens, it doesn't really blow me away. It should have been more shocking. It is awkward. I mean, it's supposed to be awkward, but it comes off as being just out of place.
I'm going to compare it to something, and you guys, I don't know if you'll agree, but it reminded me slightly of Tim Robbins from Mystic River, right? Like, his performance was kind of like like that for me, where I'm like, all right. And Tim Robbins gave me more, because it's like, oh, this is based on this and this, and he's clearly hiding something and all that. And granted, it's a different movie, a different circumstance and all that, but I thought it was kind of like, all right, emotionally, I feel like these guys are, acting in a similar way.
You think about these other movies where you have a teacher and a student, Lolita. That's tension. That's sexual tension. Yeah. There's no sexual tension in this movie between these two. None at all.
Well, that's Nabokov, too, and that's not Benioff or whatever.
Yeah, but why does he give her a B- when we could see that she is probably the best student in his class? She has a point. The poem that she reads in front of everybody else, you could tell that she's the one that probably actually is invested in the class. And she even says, why am I getting a B-? All these other ones can barely even read. It just didn't make sense. If he wasn't that much in love with her.
Or is he trying to hide it?
Yeah.
Is he trying to hide it?
Or is he trying to force a confrontation? Who knows? But they didn't give us anything like that. That's just headcanon,
Right.
Yeah.
That was my big hot take from this one, was that it's like, could that have been Philip Seymour Hoffman? Could that have been somebody else? I don't know. Like, I mean, could you have taken somebody else and put him in that role? I kind of feel like you could have.
I don't know if it's how it's written or how it's performed.
Or directed, maybe he just let Hoffman go and said, okay, that's your choice. Let's live through this,
Because he can do better than this. I think he can show a stronger array of emotions.
Oh my God, did you ever see Capote?
Capote, exactly.
I mean, like I said, he's one of the greatest actors of this generation.
Lester Bangs, man.
I mean, it's...
He's the coolest dude in that movie.
Yeah, he's amazing. If you make the argument that he comes and plays it too subtle, I could understand that, but I do think that there's substance to this character. The character's needed, because the character
I agree he's needed. I do.
He rounds out this three-man group, has developed friendships from when they were younger. And you kind of got the feeling that Monty and Barry Pepper kind of stuck up for him, because he's always been kind of awkward. And I think ultimately that's what he kind of comes off as. Not necessarily, boring and silent, but he comes off as awkward, not knowing how to navigate this particular situation that does require a lot of nuance. I still like Philip Seymour Hoffman. I've yet to find a role of his that I've not been...
It's not a bad performance. It's just like Justin said.
Standout, maybe?
A standout, exactly. It's just not a standout performance.
It's
like
just,
I said, I think it's Philip Seymour Hoffman being himself, but as a pedophile. That's about it. So the actor here is Edward Norton. He's the one this all circles around, and of course...
He's exhausted from carrying this film on his shoulders.
Right. He, like you said, he was a busy man in 2002 here, doing all these type of movies. The mirror thing is similar to Fight Club. It's two personalities, fighting each other over what he's done. One giving him, saying that this is because of all them. They're at fault. They're the reason why you're here. And he's like, no, I'm the reason where I'm at. So
that's kind of the scene of the film, I think.
By far. And for this scene alone, he should have gotten nominated for Best Actor. That whole scene is brilliantly written. It's expertly pulled off by an actor who's at the top of his game at this point in time. The first time you see it, it is as jarring as the similar sequence in Do the Right Thing, where everybody insults everybody else's ethnicity. And to see this guy, he's blame everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But to have the self-awareness to point all of those fingers that he's pointing at all of these different groups, he points all of the fingers back at himself. It's so amazingly pulled off. This is quintessential Spike Lee, and it's a master's class by Edward Norton.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, Ed Norton does carry a lot of this movie. He has to carry a lot of the emotional baggage here, because this is his vehicle. This is about Monty. This is about his last day before his life changes forever. He's brilliant here. There's no other way to put it.
I love the struggle of worried about what's going to happen to him in prison. He's worried that he's going to be somebody's bitch. okay, or get his ass kicked, or might even die. He's really worried about this. But do you buy Edward Norton as a wuss scared of prison? I mean, that's the problem with Edward Norton, like seeing
His
films
low
like
point.
Fight Club and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, when I see him in a film, I almost don't buy him as somebody who is afraid.
Oh, watch him as Worm again, then, man, in Rounders.
Well, yeah,
Absolutely. Or,
but even then, Worm didn't have a problem going to prison. He manipulated everybody while he was in prison. He would make deals here, make deals there, just to survive, and that and that's what the I guess you can call them the mafia. There, tells Monty basically, how to, what you need to do to survive. It's all about surviving in prison and stuff. Based on like how a character at the beginning handled the dog. You have this dog who could tear your neck out right at the beginning. In fact, he kind of get bit or he gets scratched on the neck. Right there, that tells me that he's not afraid. He takes chances. And that's why he ends up where he is, because he does take chances. But then to flip that and basically they can't toughen up a little bit before he goes to prison, I don't know if I'm saying it's hard to buy. When you establish your character as kind of a badass at the beginning, it's kind of hard to accept him as a pussy later on.
I don't think he's that at all. I think his fear is 100% real and it's valid. It's like he tells Barry Pepper, he goes, yeah, I'm real tough when I got Kostya standing behind me.
Yeah,
and he even tells Nikolai, I've never had to pull my gun because he's always had Nikolai behind him as the muscle. So yeah, he's a tough guy, but he's not tough like a hardened criminal. This is his first stint going into jail. He knows what type of people that are going to be in there. And this is part of the social justice part of the whole movie. He talks about the overcrowding. They're in a gym with 200 other people. The guards aren't going to be there to save him. But if he's going to Rikers is considered one of the most violent prisons in America. These guys know that when they're going away. So his fear about what's going to happen to him is totally justified.
And he pulls it off fine, and I have no problem with that. My thing is, though, Edward Norton's characters are they're mostly characters of strength. When you start off this movie as somebody who's willing to take on a vicious dog and willing to, pick him up and throw him in the trunk, that's scary. For me, that takes a lot of balls and takes a lot of he's not afraid about his neck torn out by a dog. It is part of the performance, though. He's able to sell it by the range of his emotions when it comes to going to prison. And it's great that we're seeing here a day where he's wondering where it all went wrong. And even at the end there, where the option about not going to prison, and what could happen if he ran. I like the fact that they ran with that, and then at the end, we see him back in the car, and then we're left. Wikipedia says that they're still heading towards the prison, which I believe they are. We just don't know if he's actually going to prison or him and his dad are actually going where his dad's recommending to do.
I don't buy that they're headed there. I mean, Monty's the coolest guy ever. Everybody likes him. Even the Russian mob is like, we still like you and all that. Good luck and all that. They're not trying to kill him. They're not trying to threaten him. They were trying to help him. This movie is essentially about what it's about, but it's more about Monty's emotional journey in the course of these 25 hours. You run the gambit of, okay, is he doing the 5 stages of loss, bargaining, like all of that kind of stuff? And that's kind of where you're at with the character. You can see the rage when he's in that mirror in Dad's bar, just like flipping out on it and acceptance and all of this kind of stuff when he finally gets to the end. And his fear, it builds. It's not there at the beginning because he's playing cool. He's got to be the rock. He's got to be the cool guy, and because that's his ego and all that. He doesn't want to freak out natural, but his fear is really a fear of losing everything. Losing the love that he's built, the life that he has, the apartment that he has with security for his partner. His dad's bar, like all of that kind of stuff that he's built, he knows that he messed up because he got greedy. That's where the biggest fear is. And then by the time you get to the end, he's beaten down to okay, I've already worked through all that stuff. I'm giving Doyle to Jacob. Now it's oh no, now I've got fear for myself. He just got there at the end, I feel.
Why doesn't it go to Natural? Why doesn't, Natural knows the dog and has a relationship with the dog?
she's moving back in with her mom, and the mom hates the dog.
Oh, okay.
And the dog doesn't like Barry Pepper.
Yeah, it does not.
Which is
But
kind of funny.
It doesn't help that Barry beats the crap out of Monty at the end, and the dog watches.
Another great reason why it wasn't Jacob, doing
his journey through these 24 hours. It's what a person would really go through. I kind of put myself in that situation. It's like, yeah, I would be trying to figure out who put me into this situation that I find myself in. Was it the person that I've trusted that's shared my apartment with me and shared my bed? Did she betray me? And if not her, who? There's a lot of real emotion there, and I like that we get to see the glimpses of him back when he met Naturel and how that all progressed.
How he's a different character than Jacob, and he essentially did what Jacob was trying to do.
His character is somebody tangible, that there's a reality there you feel for. And while he's probably not, as Barry Pepper's character points out time and time again, he's done a bunch of bad things and made money off of other people's addictions, as we see from the first scene.
Yep.
Or the second scene of the movie. He's still redeemable because he does have the love for Doyle. He sees the good in that the dog deserves to be loved. So he's a very complex character.
You brought up Naturel and the first meeting of them at the park on the swing set, and I'm not sure how I feel about this. It comes off for me a little creepy because I don't know the age range here.
Dude,
I don't
totally
know
creepy.
how old he is. She's coming off being, 17, 18 years old. I don't know how old he is. Talking to a girl on the playground. So that's why I was saying later on, when it came to him hitting on the other student that was in class and saying that she's hot, it almost made me look at both of those characters and say, you're a little bit of a sleaze when it comes to girls, because you have a thing for high school age girls.
I got the impression that maybe he's still in his early 20s or mid 20s. So I don't think that the age difference isn't too terribly bad at that point. It's still, she's 17. She's actually she just turned 18.
Turned 18, yeah.
And so, because that's when he goes, well, this conversation would be a lot shorter.
I mean, I guess it makes sense because her friend that's on the swing set with her knows him because, hey, didn't you go to school with my brother? So maybe the age range isn't too bad. Earlier in the film, when you see him talking about how hot the girl is in the class, it does come across being a little nasty,
a little bit. But he also notices things. He knows people, and he sees how Philip Seymour Hoffman is looking at her. When Philip Seymour Hoffman isn't looking at her, he catches how she's looking at him. He's like, that's interesting.
See, I think that's interesting that you see that, because I don't think I see that in the movie. Maybe Jacob does a great job of hiding it to the point where nobody else notices it.
Only Ted noticed.
Only Ted and Monty seem to know it, right?
I mean, he's obviously lusting after her. When she's reading that poem, if you can't tell that he has a thing for her at that point in time, I don't know what to tell you.
No, I see it. I'm not saying I don't see that.
He's obviously lusting after her.
Maybe if I had a scene of, like, what's in his mind, like, wanting to be with
like
her.
Then all of a sudden, now we're in a different movie. I
don't think we are in a different movie. I think
I think
we are.
Besides Monty, it's a different movie. But
yeah, Monty he's great here, and I like the fact that even when presented with at the very end, where he finds out that Kostya's the one that did it, and he kind of knew that that's where this was going to go, he still is hurt and shocked by that, and he's not the one that ends up doing Kostya in. He just leaves it and just wants nothing to do with it, and he says, I'm done. We're even. And he just leaves it at that.
By the way, great performance, by the way, by Tony Saragusa there. I didn't even know that was him. I didn't even know that was him when I first watched it the first time around. And then when I watched it the second time around, I'm like, who is this guy? And I had to look it up, and I'm like, no. He does a really good Ukrainian type of accent there. I mean, it's
very much
his dialect coach must have really worked with him Pretty good. Yeah, I'm not saying he had the greatest performance ever. I thought this was,
Serviceable.
a
It
very
really is.
serviceable role. Yeah, I thought he did a very decent job at it. So kudos to him. I'm surprised he didn't do more after this.
He
Me
did
too.
very little. He was on The Sopranos, and I think he played himself a number of times.
I know. I think Spike Lee said that he watched Hard Knocks, when he was playing football, and that's what intrigued him to play this role. Because originally, I think they wanted him to be like Italian mafia, right? But
Right,
he's
not
like,
the Russian mob.
actually, it was Tony that basically said, because I'm Italian, he doesn't want to play that. He wants to do something different, which is kind of cool. You get your first big, real acting role, and you tell your director, nah, I don't want to be a stereotype Italian mafia Russian, type of guy. Can I have a Ukraine? Can I have a Ukraine accent?
It was cartoony, but it worked for what it was, and it was believable. Just like playing off of Norton and all that, it worked.
Yeah,
I didn't
they
have any
worked well
problem with
together.
it.
I think it's because Edward Norton can carry also any actor that's around. I mean, I just go back to Primal Fear every time I see Edward Norton, and I just think about, wow. It's a shame that he has a reputation of being difficult, because I think it's cost him a number of roles throughout his life.
I think he's like Val Kilmer in that aspect, where it's like he cares a lot about the projects that he's on, so he wants to make sure that they're good. I got that from like a lot of the stuff that he's talked about. Like when you see him in Birdman, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like he's essentially doing a meta version of someone who would be like this, and he's perceived like this, and I'm like, okay, I totally get it.
Great point about Val Kilmer. I think that's nice comparison between the two.
He was right about Dr. Moreau. Like he was right. So it's like difficult or whatever. Val Kilmer was correct. So.
Primal Fear, of course, what a way to come out. What an initial offering. But, I mean, American History X is still as hard and difficult of a movie as that is to watch. He is absolutely brilliant. He's maintained that level. I mean, yeah, he does have the reputation of being a little bit difficult, or a lot difficult.
Or a lot.
Depending on who you talk to.
Marvel.
I feel like he also wasn't wrong there.
Yeah. It's
not that he's wrong. It's just his approach to it, though. I think when he challenges things, he just comes around off being maybe off-putting, a dick, controlling, things of that nature.
Sounds like Mankey from Mallrats.
I do want to touch on how the false ending with Brian Cox, which Brian Cox here is amazing. He's probably going to go down as one of the best character actors ever.
Who's better? I mean...
Yeah, I mean...
You ever see him on Deadwood?
Yeah, or even on the HBO show...
Succession?
Succession.
Super Troopers.
Super Troopers. Yeah, the fact that he can go from Super Troopers to Succession, throw in the Bourne movies, too.
Troy.
I mean, he was the original Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. Well, not that was a really good movie, though. Manhunter was...
It's borderline.
Yeah.
But this false ending that they put there in front of Monty, I think at the very end, Justin, you had brought up, we kind of see him go through the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. At the very end, it seems like he accepts his fate. He's not going to shirk the responsibility. And plus, I think he knows, too, that that's just a pie in the sky type of a view. The chances of that actually succeeding are very slim to none. And I think he understands that more than his dad does, because he's been in with the criminal element. It's kind of one of those things that's kind of sad. And it shows you what type of guilt and what type of a person his dad is, too. That he's willing to sacrifice the only child that he has so that he can try to be happy, because he feels guilty for taking the money. And because that's another part of this whole movie, is how people that are in his orbit play off of guilt if they've accepted money from Monty for things. And we see that because I know Ken wants to bring up Naturel and Rosario Dawson. It's interesting to see how the two main characters that have taken money from Monty, how they react to him going away. and the guilt that they both feel. I think it's well written. I think it's well produced. I like the picture that they paint, but I'm also glad to see that they didn't end with that and that he is going to prison to end the movie.
He's all white-haired, aged at the end with kids around him and all that.
I think it would have been nice at the end there, when they're driving, to show like where they were at. If you turn here, this is where you're going to the prison.
Oh, yeah.
But if you,
you mean
just before, we just
end it like Castaway, where you actually come to a crossroads.
It's, I know you think that.
It's one of the dumbest, most ignorant endings to a movie. The only thing that was dumber is when we did The Departed, and the rat goes across the very end of the movie.
What you're saying of that, but I think here, it plays off interesting. Give us a I don't know situation. Yeah. When we look at him beat up still in the car, we're assuming he's going back to prison. If you're showing the car getting ready to make that decision to turn or go straight and then go to black, that makes it more interesting. What did he end up doing? That's
better than them coming up to have to make a decision and then going black.
As far as the money goes, I think it's how they found the money. So we're talking about Natural. You have the DEA agents come in.
Great
they know where the money's at.
Isaiah Whitlock Jr., by the way.
It's an interesting performance. I know some people really like it. For me, I think it's a little... Yeah, well, it's a little...
It's Bunk from The Wire.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never seen The Wire, so for me...
This was before The Wire, though. So
yeah, it's awesome.
But the fact that they know where the money is, but the look on Natural's face where they're getting this money, it's almost like they want us to believe too much that she had a part of it. She has this weird look on her face like she's the one that set him up. For me, it was a little too much. I thought they could have maybe pushed back on them, like, hey, you can't do that, or something to make it seem like she was fighting them for us to kind of make our own decision. But it almost felt like they were trying to set us up to make us also believe that she set him up for whatever reason. They have that side shot of her where she has this look of like she had done something wrong. It just bothers me. And we've talked about Rosario Dawson in like Clerks 2, and she's a fine actress. I think this is another one of those performances where you could have swapped in anybody here as well, just because I feel like they missed the boat on this character and could have given a little bit more meat on the bone for her, because she is talented enough to make more of this role. And of course, they want to concentrate on Monty, but I think they would have been better served to give her more to work with.
I think that scene that you're talking about, she's the only one who doesn't know what's going to happen. Monty's sitting back acting cool because he knows, he's like, do you want to just get this sham over with? And the other guy's like, they know. Everybody knows what's going to happen except for her. That was my take on it, that it's like,
you think she didn't know that there was money in pot? I think she knows.
No, she didn't know they were going to find it.
Monty figured it out the moment he sat on the couch.
They also saw the side shot of her after they find it. Like, she was the reason for them finding it.
But you also have to remember, this is not just your average look-back scene. We're seeing this from his perspective. This is his memory going back and looking at things, trying to dissect this. And he's doing what anybody would do in this situation, which is overanalyzing every little thing that she does and trying to pin it and see if it was actually her. He's trying to figure things out. So I think in that sense, you have to look at it from that point of view that, yes, this is not just a normal peek back. This is somebody's memory that's searching so hard to find the reason why he's in the situation he's in. Also, too, the whole thing when he goes into the interrogation room and they show her walking out, that is a complete 100% real. The cops will do that to somebody to fuck with their head, to try to get them to break. Because ultimately, like I said before, what they want is for him to flip on Nikolai. Because that's how that works. They start from the bottom and they work their way up. So everything that she does is going to be overanalyzed by Monty. And that's why he asks Frank to do what he does, which is push her to the limit to try to get her to see if she would break. I think Rosario Dawson does an amazing job here. For her age, the age range she's supposed to be playing here, I think she's a really good actress for this particular role.
Like, who else would you have picked in 2002?
Yeah, I don't really know.
You know,
Who else would you have wanted to see play in that particular silver dress too? I mean, that's
and she
pretty
was
amazing as to why.
the connection to Anna Paquin's character, right? Like, oh,
Right.
Naturelle is so cool.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
that I think the character itself didn't have enough meat on the bone. And here's the other thing. I think I would have liked it better. I like what you're saying here, and I agree we're looking at it through Monty's eyes, so I can accept that. But I would also have liked Monty to kind of start looking at other people, because it's the only focus he has seems to be on Naturelle. That is she
Right,
the
because he's
only
been
one
told.
possible? Then why is he still with her? If he thinks that she
Because he
betrayed
loves
him,
her.
It's so
It's
complicated,
easy,
yeah.
but it's complicated.
yeah.
And he's
and he-
obviously in love with her.
He can't spend
and he's
time
been-
with her before he goes to prison because he's
Right.
so in his own head.
But even
And
when he finds out that she didn't do it, he still doesn't spend time with her before he goes to
No, he's
prison.
not nice to her. That's true. He is very mean
Well,
and
he-
withholds.
The night is really, at that point, is really over. Everything is pretty much done.
I mean, he
At
doesn't
that-
even say
by that
goodbye to her,
point.
does he?
Because it's too hard. Think about this. I mean, he's resigned himself to the fact that the person that he considers the love of his life is going to be gone by the time he gets out. He's in a very difficult, very, very difficult situation. And he just wants to make sure that what he thinks to be true is true, and that he doesn't want to believe that she did this. It's a heart-wrenching type of a thing. Because, yeah, I mean, there are points where you feel the indifference that he has towards her, but he still loves her. It's a very complicated
And I
situation.
get that all up until he finds out that Casca was the one that portrays him. The first thing he should do is run towards her and, embrace that love. But he really doesn't do that. But I agree with everything that you're saying, and at the end, I do believe that he loves her. I think the best scene that I think she's in is when she is talking with Frank. When her and Frank are going at it, that's about the best part of her role. Everything else, I think, is just kind of okay. But that scene with him sells it for me. Like I said, she's a great actress. I have no problem with her in this role. And I don't think I want anybody else in this role. I just think it could have been written a little bit better.
I think it's the writing, Ken. Like, in all honesty, because there's parts like that you're talking about. It's like, yeah, it's kind of convenient how everything ends with the Russian mafia, right? It's kind of convenient how, like, these things play out, and you look out and, everything that happened with the DEA agents, it's like too finely wrapped up. And I kind of agree with you on that, and I think that the dialogue and the performance is very good. It's just like the plot itself is really being held up by the performances of Edward Norton and Brian Cox and Barry Pepper and Rosario Dawson and then, Anna Paquin and Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's like they're doing the heavy lifting because the writing is like, okay, it's there. Now do something with it.
Yeah. Look at the criticisms of the last 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. I mean, we're talking a similar thing. It's not that big of a stretch that the writing here could be a little thin. I do think, though, that if you look at the characters themselves, I do think the characters are well fleshed out. They do kind of wrap everything up in a neat little bow and, in a little over 2 hours.
Which, for the kind of movie it is, it's just kind of strange. Okay, I'm going to go straight to how I feel about this movie. It's a very slow movie that doesn't have any real build-up and doesn't have any payoff.
It's a character study. This is a character-driven movie. There's not going
But
to
do
be
I
a lot
care
of...
about any of these characters? Do I
Well-
care about any of these characters? Do I care about the drug dealer, Monty? Hey, you were a drug dealer, and you got caught and you got sent to prison. You deserve it. Congratulations.
No one's
No.
denying that, man. Like, in the movie, nobody denies that.
There's nobody
they're-
here that I'm invested in. They're good performances. And I'm not saying that the story isn't bad. I'm just saying it's just I feel like I'm just there and I'm just watching. I'm not saying paint dry. That would be really kind of harsh on this, but I'm waiting for something interesting to happen, something, unexpected to happen, something like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Everything in this movie I saw coming. There wasn't anything surprising in this movie. There wasn't that jaw-dropping moment. My favorite character in this whole darn movie is the dog. That's my favorite character in this whole darn movie. He's a feisty character. Fighter right off the bat. It's like, oh, poor little dog. I hope he's okay. He's the one that I'm invested in because he got beaten up and he's just a poor innocent dog. All the rest of these people deserve whatever they get. Because
that's indicative of the last movie that we talked about with Do the Right Thing, where it's like there's no clear character to root for. They're all so gray. Like Mookie was a piece of garbage, but he was also the main character and also the hero, but also a piece of garbage. So it's like, oh, okay. So it's kind of like that too. Like Monty is one of the most charismatic characters I've ever seen on film. Everybody likes him in this movie. Even the police were nice to him and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, he's the apotheosis of cool, Yeah. And everybody has to live in his presence, and that's this movie.
And here's the difference between him and Do the Right Thing. Do the Right Thing slowly builds that tension to the point of boom at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Where this movie doesn't have any build up. Do we really care who sold him down the river? No, we don't care. There's no
stakes in it for any of the main characters, I suppose, really.
Right, exactly. Whatever happens at the end, happens at the end. The only person that something different happens to is Casca. He gets killed or beat to the inch of his life, one of the two, because we don't really get to see them actually kill him. I'm sure they killed him. I'm positive on it. But he's the only character that's something, and you know what? We don't care about him either. When we see his character sitting on, he's talking to the girls, and making bad sexual comments to them. And, all these characters are kind of scummy in their own way. Even as the best friends, we got Jacob who wants to sleep with his student. And we got Barry who thinks that he's God's, gift to women and to everybody. He acts like a dick throughout the whole movie too. The only person I almost feel bad for is the dad. But then he also took the money. He built a life off of his son's reputation. So why do I want to care about that either? I'm just not invested in with them. I don't think it's a bad story. I think the acting is really good in most cases, but I think it's the writing. And it's also that they sell this movie as a post 9/11 movie, and I don't see it. At the beginning of the movie, they show all these images of the World Trade Center and the lights and all that. And later on, they show it, Ground Zero, them, shoveling up all the debris and stuff still from the high-rise that they're in. But outside of that, this movie has nothing to do with 9/11. For whatever reason, I read these reviews and they talk about how this is one of the best post-9/11 movies. It has nothing to do with 9/11.
I think it just does in the sense that when he pans the camera to show the kid on the bus, to show like the people when he's walking, like all the different faces, the representation that it shows, I think that's what he's trying to go for. Like, this is New York. This is who we are. It's this guy, and that one, and that woman, and that, and like that's what he's going for. It does not have anything to do with the plot. You are 100% correct. But those shots are probably where that comes from.
I think what my problem is, I've watched this 20 years too late. I think that's what my problem is. Whereas, like, now, 20 years later, it's not that I don't, feel bad about what happened on 9/11. I, of course, do. That was a very traumatic time in our lives, seeing that all happen on TV. I remember being in training at work. We actually saw the second plane hit the towers live because the newscast was on there watching from the towers. But 20 years later, we see all these documentaries and we've had these anniversaries, 5, 10, 15, 20 and stuff like that. We've distanced ourselves from 9/11 now. So when I watch it, 9/11 doesn't have that strong a meaning as maybe for both of you who saw it very soon after it was released.
Interesting. What do you give it for a grade then? Because I don't feel like you'll influence me, but now I'm kind of curious on where you're going with this. So what do you think?
Okay, so if we're talking about wrapping this up and going with our grades here, and I've just kind of stated a lot of what I've been thinking about this movie. The movie has some great moments. Edward Norton is just brilliant as he normally is. I thought, Barry Pepper, I agree. I think he also was a standout here. And Tony Saragusa, wow. I'm not saying he blew me away, but when I found out it was him, I have to give him kudos for that. The cinematography is really good here. The shots that are being used, the angles that are being done, the lighting, everything about how it's shot is really awesome. The score kind of bothers me from time to time. I feel like it's overdone. It's
Melodramatic.
a little overdramatic for what this is, because the music that seems to be playing seems to be pointing towards 9/11, but this movie has nothing to do with 9/11. I don't know. It's like a combination of so many different things, but then you hear kind of like, I don't know, like a Far East type of sound going on at times. And it's like, why do we have that? The only thing I could think of is it's because of 9/11, what had happened within the past year of this film being made. I'll cut to the chase. I think this movie is just a C. I mean, for entertainment purposes, for me, it's just there. It's not something I'll ever watch again. I understand where Ted's coming from as far as the character development, and I think I appreciate the movie for that, but I feel like I needed some things here and there to kind of move the plot along, make it more interesting. The characters, especially Monty, he's interesting, but everything around that's going on, it's almost feels like paint by numbers a little bit. I know Ted just kind of gave me this look of what, but why I say by paint by numbers is there's no surprises in this movie. There's nothing that happens. We know the girlfriend didn't do it. I thought it probably was Casca, because who else could it be? It wasn't his friends that did it, because his friends are nowhere even near what's going on here. So who else could have done it? There's just nothing that comes off being like, wow, that just happened. If you like a character study, maybe this movie is for you. If you're looking for turns in the movie, shifting from one thing to another, you're not going to get it from this movie. You're just not.
It's so funny. I want to give I want to be brief because I want to give Ted a chance to rebut. As I mentioned, you're not going to influence my opinion here because I had already formed it. So, and I also gave this one a C. I think that it's an average movie with some items in it that are above average. The things that we talked about, those performances, Edward Norton is phenomenal. I'll watch this again on like YouTube clips or anything else like that to see him playing against Barry Pepper and all that. But as a whole, I feel like it's lacking. You wouldn't look at this and be like, this is the best Edward Norton's ever been. It may have been, but it's not the best movie. And I'll go back to a Primal Fear. I'll go back to a Fight Club, or I mean, even some of the other ones, like we were talking about Birdman. I think that there's a lot less here. It's like if I was to grade this like a boxing match, oh, well, you knocked down the opponent 2 times in round 2, but that's not going to mean you won every round. Go to check the scorecards. As an aggregate, it's a C. It's an average movie with some extraordinary things in it, like the cinematography, which is fantastic. The performances, which are really good. But in the end, it didn't wow me. And here's the funny thing, guys. I loved this movie going in. I was so excited because I had a memory of this one. Like, oh, wow, I love that movie. And I think now it's just, I've seen better. I've seen a better storyline about something that's similar to this, and it was a bit lacking for me. And that's all I got.
I like what you said about the boxing thing, because here's how I look at it. Like in a boxing match, if you have 2 highly skilled fighters, they can sometimes dance around each other for a while because of the fact that there's that respect and afraid to get hit and hurt. And so there might be some hugging and holding and all that other stuff. And you don't really see that great punch or that excitement. Like you don't see a brawl turn out in the boxing match. And I think this is what this movie is. It tries to be calculated as far as certain things, but it doesn't wow you. But I liked a lot of things that you said, and I'm totally agree with you on that.
I'm glad you brought up the score, by the way, because that was going to be part of what I said. I feel like I would have liked it if he did like do the right thing and put like some more like New York themed music in it instead of just kind of like the score. But that may not even have been something he had control over. So who knows?
Go ahead, Ted. What's your thoughts, man?
Well, there's a few things here. for anybody who says that this doesn't have a social justice type of a bent to it like a lot of other Spike Lee stuff, that's not true. I think that this shows the indictment of the Rockefeller laws that wrongfully punished harshly people who were first-time offenders and put in mandatory minimum sentences for people who really probably didn't deserve it. I think that the look at the DEA through that particular scope as well as, that these aren't nice guys. They're out there for, they're not out there to catch the bad guy. They're out there to catch the guy that they can get.
Yeah, that's
And
very true.
and I like the fact that it is an indictment of the Rockefeller mandatory minimum laws, because they did so much more harm than they ever did good. It's just a classic overreaction that America had to the war on drugs. As far as this movie goes, no, it's not a traditional 9/11 movie. It's not the overly dramatic visions of that day, but it's the things that are shown here is that ultimately Monty finds a humanity, like the kid in the bus, and they write their names to each other. There's stuff that's in his dad's bar that is a tribute to the engine companies that were there at Ground Zero. It's about the perseverance of New York. That's really where this lies. To get into the meat of the movie, this isn't a thriller. This isn't even a study like Do the Right Thing, where you feel the tension build throughout the movie to an enormous climax that was inevitable. This is a snapshot of one single day in a person's life that just happens to be a monumental day in that one person's life, and how it affects, like a ripple in a calm pond, everybody that's around him. That's what's so intriguing to me, is to see how everything around Monty is affected by decisions that have been made. And all of the people here have flaws. And here we're talking about real people. That they're flawed individuals, just like we saw in Do the Right Thing. Is the writing sometimes with some of a few of the characters possibly a little thin? Yes, probably. The further you get out from the center, I think that's also inevitable. There's going to be characters on the very edge of the fringe that are going to get a little short-shifted. From my personal opinion, that's where Philip Seymour Hoffman makes up for a lot of the thin writing for his character, because I do think that he brings a lot to this character. I love how these characters interact with each other, and I like the story that this is ultimately told. A story of not necessarily redemption, but of a person who's looking to maintain humanity going into an inhumane situation, and to maintain that humanity. And that's what I see when I see this movie. This movie is a movie that I pick up every now and then. It's not one that I watch on a continual basis, but it is one of my favorite Spike Lee movies, just because I think it's brilliantly acted. There's not one actor here that doesn't show just how good of an actor they are. They're at the top of their game. This movie for me is a solid B. No, it's not going to be an A, like Do the Right Thing. That's a different movie, and that brings out different emotions. That's a true look at a particular situation, whereas this is completely different. And I think that's part of the brilliance of Spike Lee, is that he can take something like this, but also then make a Do the Right Thing, or the next movie we're going to talk about, Black Klansman. He's very diverse here. And I think doing a character study like this is a very difficult thing to direct, because there has to be a lot of nuance here. And I think that he gets the best out of his actors here.
Listening to you talk about this, I do feel like a lot of times, like when I listen to the podcast, I feel like, oh wow, I could watch this movie now with a fresh set of eyes and all that. My whole thing about this film is that I didn't feel particularly emotionally moved And I think Ken was kind of alluding to that, and I'm like, I wonder if I'll watch it again, if I'll feel differently, because I will watch it again, but I wonder if it will be different next time.
I think it's interesting what you said, Ted, and the fact you referenced some things of the time. This movie is almost for intellectuals. You know, people who are like, they like to read a lot. They like to read what's going on in the world. Like you were mentioning how people were treated at that time. They had the book thrown at them for something that was minor, like selling pot or something like that. Someone like me would have known that about what was going like that in 2002. I'm not invested in those type of things. But someone like you is invested on that. This type of movie kind of excites you a little bit more because you know more about that kind of stuff and you see those type of things. And I think for someone like you, I think this movie fits a little bit better with someone like me who's maybe not invested in those type of things. I want to just be entertained by the movie. Doesn't really get it as much.
Yeah, no, it's fair, and it's the mandatory minimums are something that I think it was maybe a year or so ago that John Oliver on Last Week Tonight, he covered mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums are something that are still being fought across the country because a lot of these laws, these archaic laws, New York was held up because of Dukakis and everything that happened in 1988 with the election for president, where the laws were passed where the punishment for carrying an ounce of marijuana, you were going to get punished more for that than you were to have 2 ounces of cocaine. It is just absolutely insanity. Those two drugs cannot be compared in any particular way other than the fact that they're illegal, or that they were illegal at the time. These laws were passed all over America, and it's something now that we're having to struggle against. So, yeah, I do understand what you're saying there.
To each their own.
We'll have to wait for the sequel, but in the meantime, fellas, since we've already gone through that, Ken, what are they saying about us on Facebook there?
So join us on Facebook, Hooked on Movies. We discuss these movies that we review. We discuss other things that has to do with Hollywood. You know, right now there's a strike going on.
Yeah.
And nothing new is, being done. I think, though, we have enough material to last us. If they didn't make another movie for the next 50 years, we'd be okay. There's so many movies that we talk about here on Hooked on Movies that we reference to. Some of them I'd have never seen, and some that you guys have never seen. It's just so much out there now. It's hard to watch everything. Like back in the 80s and 90s, it was a little bit easier to kind of watch. Now you just have not only, have movie studios, but you have networks now that coming out with movies and TV series and things of that nature that weren't done before. If they don't make another movie, I'll be okay.
So what you're saying is we are in zero danger of Hooked on Movies going back to revisit One-on-One.
We're in no danger of us going back to One-on-One. Though I might do that just to torture Ted. So
I may find that movie now just to watch it.
I'll let you borrow it. I have a copy. So.
All right, I will take you up on that. This is great. Ted, anything on X or formerly known as Twitter?
Yeah, all of a sudden now it's X. So, find us on X at hookedon_movies, or we could call it the artist formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's rated X. I mean, all of a sudden it just gives it a bad vibe.
Or the crack dream that Elon Musk is having at this particular hour.
It's his 25th hour.
Yeah, it's his 25th hour. So, yeah, just find us there. We'll be more than happy to interact with you there, give you updates about things that are happening, and of course, whatever podcast version you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, we're available everywhere. If you can, leave us a 5-star review, because that helps us get noticed. The more reviews we get, hopefully one day we can say that we're Rotten Tomatoes certified, so we can right some of these wrongs.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys for having me on for these past two episodes with Spike Lee. I look forward to doing a couple more in the future. I know we are tentatively looking at Eric returning for the next episode, which is fantastic. So
So
listeners
he
can
found
look
his
forward to that.
pants.
I think he bought
Yep.
new ones. I don't think he actually found the pans.
okay.
I think somebody gave him about $10 and he went down to the local thrift store and bought himself a new pair of pants.
Like that last
Gotcha.
season of Game
That's
of
good.
Thrones, he just cobbled together a whole bunch of stuff and it works.
He threw stuff at a wall and see if it stuck.
Yeah.
Instead of coat of many colors, he has a pants of many colors. So
There you go. I thank the listeners for putting up with me and all that, and thank you, gentlemen. And why don't
Thank
you bring
you.
us home, fellas?
See you at the movies.
see you next time on Hooked on Movies.